In 1846, there was a stretch of land in the Deep South that maps rarely named correctly. Some marked it as Hollow Creek, others avoided marking it at all. The road that led there narrowed until wagon wheels cut grooves so deep they filled with black water after every rain. Cypress trees leaned inward, their roots rising from the soil like twisted fingers, and fog clung to the ground long after sunrise, as if the earth itself was reluctant to wake. Travelers who passed near it said the air felt heavier there, not humid, but burdened, as though something unfinished lingered beneath the soil. At the center of that land stood a plantation house built to impress. Tall white columns, wide verandas, polished floors imported from New Orleans. It had once been a symbol of success. Now it felt more like a monument to control. That house belonged to Margaret Caldwell. Margaret Caldwell was not born cruel. She was born certain that the world was ordered the way God intended, certain that power was proof of favor. She grew up surrounded by servants who obeyed before she spoke, and by adults who praised her discipline rather than her kindness. By the time she married Samuel Caldwell, one of the largest landowners in the county, she already understood her place in the hierarchy of the world. When Samuel died suddenly of fever, leaving her a widow before she turned 40, that certainty did not crack. It hardened. People expected grief. They saw restraint. They expected collapse. They saw control. Margaret wore black for exactly 1 year, attended church without fail, and accepted condolences with polite distance. She did not cry in public. She did not lean on neighbors. And she certainly did not sell land or seek another husband to guide her. When the mourning period ended, Margaret assumed command of Hollow Creek completely. Overseers reported directly to her. Accounts were rewritten. Schedules tightened. No detail escaped her attention. The enslaved population numbered over 300, and she knew how many were men, how many women, how many children. She knew which were strong, which were sickly, which obeyed quickly, and which required reminding. To many, this efficiency would have looked impressive. To those who lived under it, it felt suffocating. Margaret had 5 daughters. Eleanor, the eldest, had just turned 17. The others followed close behind. They were raised with precision. Their lessons were strict. Their behavior corrected immediately. Margaret did not indulge softness. She did not tolerate disobedience. She believed love was proven through preparation, not affection. Each evening, after the house settled and the servants retreated to their quarters, Margaret sat alone in her husband's old study. The fire burned low. Shadows stretched across the walls. A portrait of her daughters hung above the mantel, painted when they were younger, their expressions still unguarded. Margaret studied it nightly. Not with warmth, with evaluation. They were beautiful. Anyone could see that. Tall, pale, well-formed. But to Margaret, beauty was meaningless without endurance. She had seen families fall, names fade, estates crumble when sons grew weak or heirs failed to command respect. She refused to let that happen to the Caldwells. Hidden behind a false panel in the study wall was her journal. Leather-bound, worn at the edges, heavy with pages filled in tight, deliberate script. She did not write feelings. She wrote observations, measurements, ideas she would never speak aloud. She wrote about blood as if it were currency, about strength as if it could be engineered, about God's will as if she alone understood it fully. One passage, written early after Samuel's death, appeared again and again in different forms. Blood determines destiny. Blood must be protected from decay. Margaret convinced herself that she was not inventing something new. She was preserving something ancient, that God rewarded those who acted decisively, not those who waited for permission. If the world was cruel, then survival required cruelty in return. Life at Hollow Creek moved like a machine. Bells rang before dawn. Fields filled with movement. Overseers barked orders. Cotton sacks dragged through soil that stained skin dark no matter how often it was washed. Margaret watched it all from the balcony, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. Even the overseers felt her presence like pressure on the back of their necks. Among the workers was a man named Isaac Moore. Isaac stood out not because he tried to, but because he did not try at all. He was tall, taller than most men on the plantation, with shoulders broadened by years of labor. His movements were controlled, efficient, never frantic. He did not speak unless necessary. He did not beg. He did not rush. Overseers noticed that he did not flinch the way others did. His eyes remained steady, alert, always watching. Isaac had been sold twice before arriving at Hollow Creek. Once as a boy, torn from his parents. Once as a man, sold away from his wife and young son in Virginia. He carried that loss quietly, burying it beneath obedience because obedience kept him alive. He had learned to read enough scripture to know when words were being twisted. He had learned to survive by becoming unremarkable. Margaret noticed him one afternoon from the balcony. He was repairing a fence below, his shirt darkened with sweat, his movements calm despite the overseer shouting nearby. She watched longer than she should have. Something about his presence fit too neatly into the calculations filling her journal. She did not call him that day. She simply remembered him. That night she asked questions. How old was he? Where had he come from? Was he healthy? Did he obey? The overseer answered carefully, uneasy with her interest. The next morning, Isaac's assignment changed. He was moved from field labor to work near the house. Repairs, carrying supplies, tasks that brought him within sight of the mansion's windows. The change did not go unnoticed. In the quarters, whispers spread. Old women shook their heads. A white woman's favor, they knew, was more dangerous than her cruelty. Favor came with expectations, costs you did not get to refuse. Isaac felt it too. Eyes on him more often. Orders delivered more precisely, less room to disappear into routine. Still, he said nothing. Survival had taught him that attention passed if you didn't feed it. Margaret fed it herself. One evening, she ordered Isaac to serve at the family dinner. The command alone sent unease through the house. Enslaved men did not stand at the Caldwell table unless punishment or spectacle was involved. The daughters froze when he entered the room. Margaret watched him as he poured wine, her gaze fixed on his hands. Strong, steady, never trembling. Strong hands, she said softly, almost to herself. Hands like those can build legacies. A spoon slipped from one daughter's fingers and clattered against her plate. No one laughed, no one spoke. Isaac finished his task and was dismissed, but the weight of Margaret's gaze followed him out. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had seen the look in her mother's eyes, the tone in her voice. It was the same tone Margaret used when making decisions that could not be argued. In the study, Margaret opened her journal and wrote carefully, deliberately. The seed has been chosen. Days passed, then weeks. Margaret arranged for Isaac to be summoned privately. When he stood before her in the study, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. She did not raise her voice. She did not threaten. She explained calmly what she expected of him, what role she had decided he would play in securing her family's future. Isaac listened without interruption. Inside, something twisted painfully. He understood exactly what she demanded. He also understood that refusal carried consequences he might not survive. You own my labor, ma'am, he said finally, his voice steady, but not my soul. Margaret's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes hardened. She dismissed him. From that moment on, curiosity turned into control. Isaac was watched constantly, his movements tracked, his tasks restricted. Overseers were ordered to keep him close. Margaret tightened her grip on her daughters. Dresses sewn identical, doors locked at night, walks supervised. She spoke openly about destiny, about sacrifice, about God testing the faithful through difficult choices. The house grew quieter. Servants avoided eye contact. Laughter disappeared from the kitchens. Margaret stopped attending church. When the preacher came to call, he left pale, refusing to speak of what was said behind closed doors. Eleanor eventually found the journal. She hadn't meant to. She noticed the loose panel while searching for a book. Inside lay the leather-bound journal, heavy with meaning. As she read, her hands shook. Her mother's plan was laid bare in ink. The daughters were not children to be protected. They were vessels, pieces in a design Eleanor could barely comprehend. When she confronted Margaret, the response was immediate. The slap echoed through the room. Eleanor tasted blood and understood that her mother believed herself righteous, dangerous. Margaret prepared for what she called a blessing. Candles were arranged, curtains drawn, doors locked. The daughters were dressed in white. Isaac was summoned. When he refused again, Eleanor stepped forward. Thunder rolled outside. Something fragile broke in the air. That night, Isaac whispered one word to the others. Tonight. Rain fell hard, masking footsteps. Isaac gathered help. Bread, water, an old blade. Eleanor slipped from her room barefoot. Dogs were released before dawn. Shots rang out. Isaac fought not with rage but with desperation. He shielded Eleanor, guiding her through trees as torches flared behind them. They reached the river as the sky lightened. Margaret stood at the edge of the woods watching. Without looking back, Isaac and Eleanor stepped into the water and disappeared. No bodies were found. Hollow Creek fell silent. Margaret stopped speaking. Weeks later, she vanished as well, leaving behind only her Bible, open to a single underlined verse. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. The plantation rotted, new owners fled, animals died. People reported whispers during storms, a tall figure by the river, a woman crying from the house. Some stories refused to stay buried, and Hollow Creek became one of them.